labor, and I worked on it for maybe 4 hours, doing the voice of Dietmar. But if I can answer any questions, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, well, Don, obviously you've worked with several people before. You know, Sandra
Yeah.
was in your debut feature. Don is also obviously a writer and a director in his own right. How did you come to be involved in this project?
Well, it's funny actually. Sharia and Sandra were recording. Sharia was in Toronto shooting a movie, and so Sandra came up to record with her because she's, you know, a real actress and she likes to act with people, not like in a sterile environment of a recording booth. So she asked me to read the part of Dietmar just because I'm a friend of hers. She said, "Can you come out because I live in Toronto and read with me?" She lives in LA, so I thought, okay, sure. So I said, just send me the script so I can read it. I read the script and I thought, oh, I know this guy. He's like this. In fact, he was like this German director that I'd met. I'd just come back from a film festival in China, and I thought, oh, he's one of those kind of guys. And so I sort of imitated him, and we read a bit, and I did my part. They weren't intending to record me, but then after a couple of takes, Anne-Marie and Sandra said, oh, why don't you just do it? Why don't you just do the part? And I thought, oh, geez, I don't know. I'm not. I'd have to work on the accent, and they said, no, it's good. And she said that she'd auditioned a lot of German actors, and they just couldn't do it. That's the bottom line. So, so they said, why don't you just do it? And I did it, and so I just did it that day, and then it came to the poem part where I was supposed to be a poem in German, and I said, I can't improvise a poem in German. I can speak 8 words or something. And they said, well, just so we did this moo 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 poem that my mother used to tell me when I was a kid, and we sort of tried to come up with something. And anyway, so that's how I ended up in the film. And
yeah, I mean, he's such a beautiful character because
Yeah.
obviously we go on this journey with Rosie, and
Yeah.
we feel so vividly that culture shock when
Yeah.
you go to a completely alien country.
I mean, I
I'm
felt I
speaking-
understood it well because I've been to a lot of film festivals, and it was a very similar experience. You end up in these strange environments where you have these culture clashes, and you meet people from another culture, and you have these sort of ecstatic, fast relationships. And so I thought I sort of semi-romantic, which.
Although immediately an asshole as
That's
well.
right. That's right. Oh, they're immediately an asshole. And
Just that's
you
a
break through
delicious
that.
part, particularly the fear of.
And so I thought I get it, and I really liked the script. So I'm very proud of it, even though I just had a small part.
Yeah, and obviously this isn't actually the first time we've seen Stick Girl.
Yeah.
Anne-Marie developed it a few years before. on
Yeah,
another
that's
project.
right. So this character of Rosie is this sort of avatar of the director, Anne-Marie, the Stick Girl, which she developed after she had a terrible accident, which she was sort of immobilized and couldn't draw. So she drew these sort of stick figures, and it became her kind of on-screen persona. She'd done a number of films with this character, but I must say this is the first time that it really made sense to me thematically. This character that is sort of unformed, of course, and featureless, which made so much sense in terms of the story. This character that really doesn't know who she is, and
It almost reminds me of Don Hertzfeld's
Yeah,
work with stick
absolutely,
figures, where
yeah.
even though it's a very simple animation, it can be so incredibly expressive.
there's something very surprising. When I saw the final film, I just thought there was something very moving about this basic character, and somehow is very emotional, I think. So.
I'm going to open the questions out to the audience, so please stick your hand up if you have anything to ask. We've got a question at the front here.
Yes.
Firstly, really, really enjoyed it, and super performance from yourself.
Thank you.
I wondered, you were talking about how you kind of got the inspiration from a German director you've met and things, but just out of interest, once you
I'm not
kind
going to
of...
say the name.
No, that's not what I was going to ask, surely. Once you see the character kind of drawn and animated, how does that kind of affect the way you perform as them? Does that influence it quite
Yeah,
much?
it's funny you should say. Well, I mean, of course, it's not drawn before. This is a film. Do you know? It was really organic, old style animation. It wasn't pre-planned like the big sort of studio animations. We did the voices first. So she did show me character drawings and said this kind of guy, you know, stubble, which is, I was cool with, and sort of blonde hair, which was, you know, I could imagine. So you know, it was helpful to see an image because it did sort of conform with my idea, but that's it. You know, it was really just based. It started with the voices, and evolves out of that. That's the way the whole film was, and it was very loose. It's not like I'd done a voice on an animated series in Canada, and it was much more restrictive. She was very loose. She was open to sort of improvisation, and I don't know if you can hear that, but it was much more organic. It was really fun that way for an actor, at least.
Yeah, it certainly feels very natural and
Yeah.
just flowing. Any other questions? Please stick your hands up high. One just up here.
Thank you. This is probably a question would have been more suitable to Anne-Marie herself,
I'll
but
try.
yeah.
I've heard her do a lot of Q&As. I've talked to her a lot.
But I thought it would have been probably a bit more suitable if the Persian poems themselves had translations, subtitles written, so the general audience could relate to them. Do you have any idea
Yeah.
why that was?
Well,
that
I mean,
approach was
generally,
taken?
I think her feeling was that you know, it's a foreigner. It's really about someone who doesn't speak the language, experiencing the foreign culture. And of course, Rosie doesn't speak the language, so she was trying to put us in that same place. You know, there's the feeling where she's hearing the prayer and she sort of turns into music and she sort of floats away. I think that's to me the sort of moment that makes sense to me. That even though she doesn't understand the words, and in fact the words disappear and it just becomes music. I think that's the experience she was trying to evoke. To me, it's not so much. It's not a literal translation of evocation of poetry. It's really about a translation into animation and into visuals. So it's really, you know, she commissioned these different animators. I'm sure it's obvious that each of the sort of different sections was done by a different animator. Some of them from all over, most of them Canadian, but many of them from different extractions, one from Taiwan, a couple of them Persian and things like that. So it was really about visual metaphor for poetry rather than a literal. I don't think she wanted people to be reading the poems, if you know what I mean. So that was what she felt. Is that a good answer? Do you
Yes,
buy that?
definitely.
I think that's.
I mean, that's one of the interesting things about the film is it does have this vast array of it's about a dozen different animators.
I think so too. I think when you hear it's a movie about a poetry festival, you might be afraid that it's just going to be a lot of poems, like reading. But the reading experience is different than the cinematic experience, and she was trying to make it a visual experience, a visual metaphor for poetry.
Yeah, I mean, each section is distinctive, and yet they never actually seem to jar. None of the transitions.
It's
all very
beautiful that way, and
smooth.
of course, when you do the voice, I didn't know any of that, and it's always quite exhilarating to see the movie.
Any other questions?
I mean, I really did a pretty good job.
Yeah, you've been very.
I think maybe I wrapped it up, but I mean, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, we'll be around all night.
I-
At least for 15 minutes.
I mean, when a couple of people, I went to a couple of screenings and people said, are there even are there these is this such a thing? Are these poetry festivals happen in Iran now? And it's funny, we went to a screening in Toronto of this film and there was this girl in the audience, this young woman who said, actually, I am a Persian Chinese, she was half Chinese, half Persian poet who was just going to a poetry festival in Shiraz next week, but it was cancelled because of this American travel ban, and all the Americans were afraid they wouldn't get back home. So maybe it is a little bit science fiction at this point, but it wasn't until up to a couple of years ago. It was, or even last year, it was possible. So I don't know. It's amazing it's amazing to think how timely, because of course this film was created before all that, before this became such a hot issue. So
Yeah, I mean, it's still going on. I've got plenty of friends. Anyone, even one of my ex-girlfriends is born and bred
one of your
American.
many
One,
ex-girlfriends.
and she was born in America, but simply because her parents are from Iran, she wasn't able to come back to the country, and she was stranded.
Well, they're afraid. They're afraid to travel, right? Because they don't know at any point that
It could change at
yeah,
any
it could
moment.
change. So
Strange times.
yes.
Well, at least this film has a bit more of an optimistic view on.
Yeah, I mean, I
multiculturalism.
think I mean that's what I was found moving about this film, and that's what was interesting to me from this Canadian perspective. That it just seemed it had this sort of optimism and this sort of almost naivety that I found very actually moving when I saw the film. Like surprisingly effective, without preaching. I found it very moving. So.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you
Don.
very much
Thanks
for
for
coming out.